Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. Last week, all eyes of the political world were on Columbia, South Carolina, when President Donald Trump, along with many Democratic presidential candidates, visited Benedict College to discuss criminal justice reform. We look at these proposals and what can be done at the state level this upcoming legislative session. President Donald Trump visited the Palmetto State on October 25th to speak at the 2020 Bipartisan Center Forum on Criminal Justice Reform, to the delight of fellow Republicans and the dismay of protesters and the 10 Democratic presidential candidates who spoke that weekend. Trump took the opportunity as a victory lap for signing the bipartisan First Step legislation into law that includes alternatives to prison for low-risk offenders. But the president's presence drew the ire of candidates, including Senator Kamala Harris, who years ago received the same award the organization bestowed upon the president.
I mean, let's be clear. This is somebody who has disrespected the voices that have been present for decades about the need for reform of this system.
As for the Democrats, they share similar views on criminal justice reform, including the need to close private prisons, reform the bail system, legalize marijuana, expunge criminal records, and help diversify the judiciary branch. Some of those efforts, such as marijuana legalization, won't fly in South Carolina, but lawmakers are looking to tackle civil asset forfeiture, preventing pregnant inmates from being shackled during labor and post-birth, improving early release for rehabilitated offenders, and other issues. Thanks to sentencing reform laws passed in 2010, fewer low-level offenders are going to state prisons, but in turn, prisons have become more dangerous, while cost savings associated with reforms haven't been reinvested to improve dangerous conditions that have led to deadly riots in recent years. With a large budget surplus expected next year, along with several criminal justice reform bills poised for movement when lawmakers return in January, there is hope more can be accomplished in the final year of the two-year session. Joining us to discuss criminal justice reform is State Senator from Greenville, Karl Allen, and criminal defense attorney Joe McCulloch. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Morning. So we just had President Trump in town. We had 10 presidential candidates in town. Senator Allen, you're a Democrat from Greenville. Tell me, what were your thoughts seeing Republican President Donald Trump here in Columbia talking about criminal justice reform? Do you think that was appropriate?
Well, it's always enlightening to talk about criminal justice reform. I did not get excited about Donald Trump coming to an HBCU in the Palmetto State. But on the issue of criminal justice reform, when we're talking nationally about this issue, I'm always excited and will not question the appropriateness of it. What I question is whether the president is genuine about criminal justice reform and it's not political. The First Step Act that he went into on the national arena, I wanted to know more about when he came to the Palmetto State about what's going to be the Second Step Act and whether or not he's able to go have coffee with the governor of the great state of South Carolina, his friend Henry McMaster, and over coffee they talk about the state of South Carolina becoming more involved in the criminal justice reform, more involved in how we treat the least of these, and more involved in doing sentencing reform and putting money in rehabilitation in our system. And so I don't think that took place. They talked, but we've got to shape the message and conversation. So he was in Columbia. I hope he'll pick up the phone and call our governor, and that they will have a passionate commitment to criminal justice reform in South Carolina that helps those that need help.
Joe, to pick up on that, do you think the president was sincere when talking about criminal justice reform? He did sign that bill, kind of helping offenders get back on their feet when they get out of prison, and it does a number of other things too. Alternatives to prison for low-risk prisoners, prohibits restraints on pregnant prisoners, mandates evidence-based treatment for opioid and heroin abuse, among others. So a lot of good things in that bill that he signed into law, but do you think that there's enough going on at the federal level when it comes to criminal justice reform?
Well, I'm not a big fan of our president, and I've generally seen over the last almost 45 years of being a prosecutor and a defense lawyer, that when somebody gets a body part caught in the criminal justice system, they start talking about criminal justice reform. So that may be in part. But the First Steps Act is a good step forward, but it's really refrying beans that have been debated for the last decade and a half, or longer, but seriously, by Republicans who came to believe in about 2012, 2013, Grover Norquist and a group of others, who created a movement called Right on Crime. I think there's still a website up. But the thrust of that was to reduce sentences, eliminate mandatory minimum sentences, to look at programmatic treatment solutions, and to generally take a view and accept scientific discussions that how we reduce recidivism, how we is by addressing alcohol, drug addiction, mental illness, because the profile of people who commit crimes are those that suffer those conditions. Now, there are people that are just dishonest, crooked, and mean, and for those people, they may need, to be housed for years and decades and so forth. But our president signed off on a bill that others wrote, and I applaud that at least. He didn't veto it. So we're moving in the right direction, perhaps at the federal level. We still need to go back to the Obama administration's directives to the Department of Justice that our sentencing guidelines, which are uniformly recognized by prosecutors and defense lawyers who practice in the federal courts, they are draconian in their application if you choose to do so. And under the Obama administration, the directive was, don't go to the most you can get them, look at the least, look at programs, look at solutions. Unfortunately, all of that was reversed by Donald Trump in his first administration, when he first came in under his very first Department of Justice U.S. Attorney.
And then Senator Allen, kind of keeping in line with what we're seeing at the federal level here, what we're seeing from these presidential candidates. Like I said, there's 10 of them in town at Benedict College talking about their platforms for criminal justice reform. You haven't endorsed anyone yet in this race as a Democrat, but you have looked at their plans. You recently had an op-ed about Joe Biden's stance on criminal justice. What are you looking for when you're evaluating these candidates? Should you want to endorse one when it comes to their stances on criminal justice?
Certainly. I started before these presidential candidates began to come to South Carolina, reaching out to discuss and talk with them about their criminal justice reform. I am looking for a presidential candidate and a president that's a Democrat that is focused upon being smart on crime and not just hard on crime. Looking for someone that has decided that we must not warehouse these inmates, we must rehabilitate them, and that they will put funding there to provide the specialized services that the Department of Corrections is saying that they need. Because let's face it, some of these folks, if you look at legislation that is now pending in South Carolina, where we're trying to reduce the time that they spend there because they have shown and demonstrated that they've been rehabilitated. If we're trying to reduce that amount of time, these people are going to get out on this street anyway. So let's put them out there where they have been fully rehabilitated. Let's give them a little oversight once they are out with specialized treatment. If they've got mental health issues, let's give Triple P the monies necessary to treat those issues. If they are domestic violence, for example, one of the best programs I see is Triple P takes now, and they've assigned 20 new counselors to focus around the state on those that have issues with domestic violence. So that type of specialized rehabilitation. So I'm looking for a candidate that will kind of put their money to the test, put their programs to the test, that will lead criminal justice reform passionately to help the people. I'm looking for one that recognizes there's this first step that has been taken, though it's a baby step, that they can transform that into a genuine step and actually get more people out with the proper services while they're out.
But a lot of those candidates had a lot of things in common too, in terms of decriminalizing or legalizing marijuana, reforming the bail system, reducing the prison population, diversifying the judiciary. But when we look at South Carolina, we can barely get medical marijuana, a committee hearing essentially. So how can we do some of those things that they're talking about, but but not have the political will to do it, in a sense, in a state like South Carolina?
Well, again, in South Carolina, you've got to be able to take them and their process, their plan, their criminal justice reform, and get the people to buy into it. And the only way that you do that is you've got to be able to show the benefits of it. And so you've got to be able to say that, look, in South Carolina, we've got 24,000 people in the Department of Corrections, and it's strapped. We don't have enough guards. We don't have enough people to oversee those that are there, and so we have a negative impact with riots and people getting killed, etc. So you've got to be able to show the benefits by saying, with sentencing reform and those candidates with my criminal justice reform, that we're able to get that down. In South Carolina now we're down to 18,000. We were projected to go to 27,000 without sentencing reform. Those benefits is what sells to the people to make them buy into this. You've got to show the benefits of anything dealing with marijuana, or whether it's legalizing, decriminalizing marijuana. Those benefits, if the people see it, the people of South Carolina, they're buying to it.
Gavin, can I jump?
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about medical marijuana too.
Senator Allen said, which is the smart on crime approach, and I want to take this from the national level down to the state level. Mm-hmm. You know, money is always a problem. Do we fix the potholes? Do we fix the bridges? Do we fix the criminal justice system? And I think that we have to keep the conversation going and make the point that the most expensive thing we've got going is crime and security on the streets. We spend more, relatively speaking, to care for the animals in our wonderful Columbia Zoo than we do at the Department of Corrections. One of the proposals I have, and we were talking a little bit before the taping started, about taking seizure monies that are generated from police, law enforcement seizures in drug-related matters, whether they seize boats, cars, helicopters, houses that are used to facilitate drugs, they liquidate that, boil it down to real money, and then it's split currently between law enforcement and prosecutors. That's kind of a fishing honey hole for law enforcement, and it has recently, by I don't know whether it was in Greenville, Carl, but a judge just declared that statute unconstitutional for exactly the reasons that it incentivizes police misconduct. The other problem is we keep getting sheriffs indicted for misusing that money. It's just there. They're constrained by statute that they can only use it to support drug training, drug operations, drug equipment, but it keeps getting spent on stuff that it shouldn't ought to be spent on. So my proposal, and I hope Senator Allen and others in the General Assembly, I've spoken this morning with Senator Harpootlian, who happens to be your suite mate, so if you guys can have this conversation. But under this proposal that I'm going to provide Senator Allen, my hope is that they will take that money, which currently about 100% goes to law enforcement and prosecutors involved in the seizure of the money, and peel off a big chunk of change, like 70% of that money, put it in a special fund for rehabilitation programs, and split it up between PP&P, that's probation, pardon, and parole, and the Department of Corrections. That doesn't cost the taxpayers anything, and it has an obvious logic. You're taking money from dope dealers, and you're curing and rehabilitating people in prison.
But we want to make sure that that money, those assets, are actually illegal and not someone that got caught up in a traffic stop and a canine gets a hit on some sort of, might be a scent of drugs, so they all of a sudden impound your car.
We can deal with that in court. What we can't do is fix people without money to do it, and this is a source of money that doesn't cost taxpayers a penny.
Yeah. And so I think what my friend Joe is talking about here is that, and you must think about this, he's talking about money, and if money, if you go around the world, if you don't believe money makes the world go around, try going around the world with no money, and you do not get very far. We are on the same page about whether or not we can take the larger chunk of what's been seized, as in his proposal, 70%. We may need to tweak that just a little bit, But we're on the same page of saying let's get that back into programs, because with the rehabilitation going forward in South Carolina is going to be the focus. And now you have your state agencies, Department of Corrections and Triple P, on board, agreeing that rehabilitation is the wave of the future, because that's what's going to reduce the population, and that's what's going to stop a lot of the technicalities that you're seeing where they were getting revoked and sent back into the system, stop them and reduce that population and save the state of South Carolina a great deal of money.
Because one of your bills, Senator, is also dealing with no parole offenses, that you want to help get people early release if they do good jobs in prison, if they do kind of keep up with things. And is that something that we need to see more of, or are people concerned when we look at, someone getting out of jail early, an offender getting out of jail early? How does that make the victim feel? I mean, I feel like that might be a point of contention with that bill going forward.
Well, S-155 is one of the greatest pieces of legislation that could be passed by the state of South Carolina, because what that does is save money to the state of South Carolina. And in all of the hearings, you had victims that were coming advocating that S-155 was great legislation, because they looked at the fact the test is not what they went in for. The test is what type of person is being released. And what it does is focus on rehabilitation. So they are rehabilitated from the time they went in. And it focuses on re-entry courses, which means that they are not only rehabilitated, but you are treating them correctly on how to re-enter society. That bill does that. It also rewards them while they are in the Department of Corrections with the work credits and education credits and things of that nature. So what you're sending out back on the street, keeping in mind that they're going to come out anyway. They're going to be released at the 85% anyway. So would you not rather your next door neighbor that is coming out be rehabilitated and have been taught how to re-enter society so that they can be productive citizens? That's the wave of the future, and that's what that legislation does. And the money savings along with that to the state of South Carolina, it makes it a no-brainer.
It goes back to money.
Well, with due respect to Senator Allen, there are members of the General Assembly who, nearing the end of the session, because of contention, disagreement, can't get anything done. The simplest thing to do is find something else to make against the law, to increase the penalties for things, to make it an 85 instead of a 55% service time. That's easy, because there's no constituent group to say that doesn't make any sense to do. So we do it, and then that just is a self-perpetuating problem. What we can do are the things that are on the table. There, to some extent, the first step, the bill announces them once again, but that nail's been hit resoundingly for decades. We've got to look at furlough programs, letting people out who can appropriately be released, treat people, as we've talked about. There are a host of things that we can do. To my understanding, largely work release programs through the Department of Corrections have ceased because they don't have the manpower to oversee people leaving the institution at 7 in the morning and going and learning and working in a restaurant or wherever, working on a skill that they'll possess when they are released. And I mean, this only makes sense. Even my friends on the Republican side of the aisle, on the national and some on the local level, are saying this only makes sense. Fix the fixable ones and keep locked up the ones that should be.
But does it get caught up in politics when people want to look tough on crime still, even
Absolutely. I had a case not terribly long ago. It was a felony DUI case. A college student who unfortunately struck another college student on the highway. He had no prior record. Without any question, he was under the influence. That is what many people call an accidental crime. It is one, of course, that the mad mothers rise up. It leaves a terrible, tragic impact on the families, both the accused, who has to go to prison, and the families of the victim. A terrible thing that involves a tragic death. The sentence in that case was 20 years. 20 years. I've had murderers get 10 years. And that's just difficult.
Yeah.
Every case is different. The judge, I respect his judgment in that case. We've asked to reconsider that sentence. But there are those offenses that really will never again occur. You know, shoplifters, sex offenders, there is a body of literature and science that says that they are more likely to offend.
A lot of repeat DUI though.
There actually aren't. If you look at the numbers well, it depends on what age. If you've got a 40 or 50-year-old who's had 5 DUIs, then that's probably going to happen again. But most people that I see through our offices are one-time, one-shot offenders who made a mistake, who will never make that mistake again.
I would like to just piggyback on that and say that from those that you say are popular to be hard on crime, most of those what I found in this S-155 legislation to reduce the amount of time that we're in there for those that have been rehabilitated and those that have earned work credits and educational credits. I'm right on the right side of history as a Democrat because most of that opposition was Republican opposition, in particular a couple of colleagues who had previously been solicitors and they were catering to that crowd. But let's face it, if you went to our director of corrections, if you went to our director of Triple P and asked them about the legislation, they will tell you that this legislation is positive legislation because it helps manage and control inmate population on the inside. And let's just think about it from a humanities standpoint. If there are no rewards to me for good behavior, if there's no real penalty that's going to affect the amount of time that I do, then why should I do good time? Why should I involve myself in education and those rehabilitative measures?
It comes down to that rehabilitation need too, and we have about 5 minutes and there's plenty to still talk about. But Senator, when we look at the 2010 sentencing reform bill, that really did help reduce a lot of incarceration, help reduce arrests, help reduce the prison populations. But now prisons have become more dangerous because of the people that are in those prisons. We've saved money by closing prisons, but it doesn't seem like we've reinvested in these in prisons. What's the holdup in the General Assembly? We had a huge riot last year. We didn't see anything move to help try and put more money. We put $10 more million into the budget this past year for better locks on doors in prisons, which you would think wouldn't be something that you'd have to do, but we're doing it. But why isn't there a bigger movement when we keep hearing such horrible things coming from the Department of Corrections as they're trying to improve these conditions in there?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a disconnect again between the having what we call the intestinal fortitude of the director of corrections and the director of Triple P to have coffee with the governor and politically get everyone on the same page to say, hey, look, this is what's happening. You've got the riots, you've got people dying, you've got people being warehoused. And so that is inhumane and almost rises to the level of violating the 8th Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment. When you look at the mental health dorm where these people lost their lives, you realize that we need to come forward. And it's not just putting more money in there, but dissect the programs that are in there. The management control aspect of it is huge in the Department of Corrections. So that's where we need to go as opposed to just throwing money in and changing locks. It's not about the locks. It's about the training and the quality of the correctional officer that's there. It's about the programming that is there and whether we are treating. If you've got a person in there that needs mental health counseling and medication, then you've got to have someone in there that's qualified to do that. If we do that, then we'll shape and rechange the attitude and the conduct within the Department of Corrections.
Really quickly, it would be nice if Governor McMaster were here, because of course he is one of the principal keys to this problem. PPP's head, Brian Sterling at the Department of Corrections, they're his appointees. They work, in a sense, for us, but really they respond to him. They report to him. I can tell you that there's a marvelous program out of Charleston that I was a part of offering to the Department of Corrections. It's an educational program. People from outside come in, they don't get paid, they're volunteers, they bring books, they teach English, they teach history to people who didn't pay attention to school or never had an opportunity to go. They're improving their lives. But it took us many, many months, not because of Brian Sterling, who was very receptive to this. It took many months to find the funding because there had to be some oversight, extra security to get people in and get people out. That's counterproductive. The governor can fix this or be a part of the solution rather than banging on the lectern and saying we got to be tough on crime because that's what's going to get votes.
And it's our governor, and so if we're talking about our governor, then he should talk to his friend
So
Donald Trump.
Invite him next time, and we'll be happy to come back.
Take this First Step Act to the second step in South Carolina. Yeah,
Well,
if they're truly friends.
We'll extend a nice invitation to Governor McMaster at some point. Definitely have him on the show, hopefully soon. But I want to thank both of you for being on the show. We got some great insight about criminal justice reform and the state of criminal justice in South Carolina. And thank you for joining us. Also, check out the South Carolina Lead. It's a political podcast that can be found on your podcast app on any mobile device. Each week, I recap the weekly political news with the reporters who cover it. From the Kennedy Greenhouse studio on the campus of the University of South Carolina, I'm Gavin Jackson.